Hello and welcome. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and you're watching Eye on Africa, our main stories. A real massacre in Burkina Faso. Human Rights Watch says 223 civilians were executed by soldiers in a single day. Heavy rain continues to bring devastation in Nairobi, with roads turned into rivers. At least 32 people died and 40,000 have been forced from their homes. And a year on since Ghana started using a new malaria vaccine, and eligible children already received more than 2 million doses across the country. More than 220 civilians were killed by Burkina Faso's military in a single day this year. Human Rights Watch says the massacre, which includes at least 56 children, occurred on February 25th. Burkinabe authorities have not commented on this report. Sam Bradpiece has the story.
According to testimony gathered by Human Rights Watch, more than 100 soldiers entered the village of Nondin about half an hour after Islamist groups had passed through the area. The soldiers went door to door, dragging people out of their houses and accusing them of collaborating with the Islamists. They then gathered them into groups and opened fire indiscriminately, including at those who tried to hide or flee. The same thing happened shortly after in the nearby village of Soro. At least 223 civilians were killed in total. And while this isn't the first time that the Burkinabe armed forces have committed atrocities in the name of counter-insurgency, it is one of the worst incidents in the past decade, according to Human Rights Watch. The organisation is calling on the Burkinabe authorities to launch a thorough investigation into the massacres. It's also calling on the African Union and the United Nations to support this investigation in order to ensure that it's independent and impartial. The Burkinabe junta, the military junta, which took power in 2022, has yet to respond to this latest report.
And as I said, authorities have yet to respond to the report. So how did the attacks come about, with Burkina Faso accused of serious human rights violations in its fight against insurgency? Answer from our analyst, Wassim Nasser.
Actually, what has been conducted since the second coup of Captain Traoré was all full-blown military policies and full-blown human rights abuses, which actually did not prevent jihadis from ongoing and from keeping their attacks. We're going to see footage from Barslago, which is less than a week old, where jihadi militants attacked the VDP, and here it is, and an army convoy on motorbikes. And despite the presence of drones in the skies, despite the presence of military personnel in numbers, where the jihadis succeeded. We have another footage of the attack of Solé, where the military barracks of Solé were overtaken and overrun. This is in December, by jihadi militants. We know that Burkina Faso, as Mali and Niger, bought Turkish-made drones, Bayraktar, and they even bought new drones which have a wider range and more capabilities and bearing arms which cover all Burkina Faso. But those drones are being used at the same time against the military, but also against the civilians in an indiscriminate way, because it is portraying Al-Qaeda militants as the defendant of those populations, and it's increasing the number of recruitments among jihadi factions. We even had the head of Al-Qaeda in Burkina Faso, and we have the footage, calling the Turks actually to stop selling drones and to stop selling ammunition of those drones to the juntas in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So today we have jihadi militants that are free to roam as they wish in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and the civilian population, at best, being accused of not hinting to their movements, or at worst, being complicit of those jihadi factions. But at the end of the day, civilian populations are left alone, and at the end of the day, it is jihadi factions that control the territory.
Heavy rain keeps on pounding East Africa. In Kenya, at least 32 people have been killed so far. 40,000 have been forced from their homes. The situation is particularly dire in slums like Matare. And President William Ruto held an emergency meeting. And Kenyans have been warned to stay on alert as more heavy rains are expected in the coming days. Sophie Lamotte has more.
A whole whole neighborhood sifting through rubble after deadly floods swept through the area. This is what's left of Colin Odombo's mother's home in Nairobi's Massacre slum. He recovered dozens of bodies from the rubble, including those of his family members.
I've lost 5 relatives. My mother, my cousin, my 2 nephews, and a neighbour who came to seek refuge here. This is where we found them. The body of my mother's neighbour was trapped right across here, and it seemed as though my cousin held her ankle with her head lodged between her thighs.
Heavy rains, exacerbated by the El Niño weather pattern, have displaced over 40,000 people so far, with at least 30 people dead. Rescue operations are still underway, and locals fear these figures could grow, as heavy rainfall is expected to last until May.
We are expecting more bodies, because yesterday was a flood. We can't manage to come to this place. So I'm expecting by the end of the day, we shall get a body from that place up to that tree. I know the shallow of that river.
President William Ruto convened an emergency multi-agency meeting on Thursday to respond to this unfolding crisis.
There are citizens living in very dangerous places, and those are the most vulnerable at this point. And I'm happy the Minister for Energy is here, so that we can begin to inform citizens if they are in places that poses danger to them, we begin to relocate them.
Elsewhere in the region, nearly 100,000 people have been displaced in Burundi, and at least 155 people were killed in Tanzania.
And meanwhile, many people still don't have access to crucial medical services at state hospitals. Doctors in Nairobi and across the country have been on strike for about a month now. Our Kenya correspondent Olivia Abizo has been following the story.
Kenyan doctors have been on strike since mid-March. They want better pay. On average, Kenyan doctors in the public sector earn about €550 a month. They also want better working conditions and for more doctors to be hired, especially young doctors who, after years of training, are still struggling to find permanent work. Now, negotiations between the unions and the government have been taking place, but so far they haven't resulted in a deal. The government has even started firing doctors for their refusal to return to work amid the ongoing strike.
The government always acts when the people are on strike, because when they can't bargain, then they always resort to victimizations, to threats and to intimidations. And the only mechanisms to do that is to give show cause letters and to fire doctors. So far we have seen a number of them being fired in different places, different facilities and different counties. But we have to hold on, because we are not crippled by the threats of different county governments or by the governments when we're on strike.
This isn't the first time that Kenyan doctors have organised a nationwide strike. Back in 2017, healthcare workers went on strike for 100 days. Union officials eventually reached an agreement with the government, which addressed many of the issues that they're still talking about today, including a maximum number of working hours, promotions, and of course, pay. But today, doctors are saying that 7 years after those changes were promised, they still haven't been registered or implemented. They've said that they're going to organise another nationwide protest next Tuesday.
A growing number of states in Nigeria's conflict-hit northern region are setting up community-based vigilante patrol units to tighten security in villages where violent killings and kidnappings are rife. With the ongoing Islamist insurgency, Nigeria's security forces have struggled with limited resources in fighting armed gangs active in remote locations, where the government is largely absent. Laura Di Biagio.
It looks like a military training. This group of men and women are getting ready for a night patrol. They're in Nigeria's northern city of Kaduna, just 100 kilometers from where 300 school children were recently kidnapped. This local vigilante group, called Civilian Joint Task Force, was formed to protect local communities from armed terrorist groups.
I was also kidnapped, and as a victim, I was taken to their camp and I spent a week in the camp. It was not the funny experience. I was really beaten, threatened to be killed.
These vigilante groups believe they have an advantage over state security forces. They're often more familiar with the territories and forests where armed gangs operate. But for this terrorism expert, most of them are inadequately equipped.
if you don't control these guys that are carrying arms to protect their community, I think criminal elements will capitalize on that opportunity and explore that opportunity in their criminal enterprise. So I think the government should, give these guys effective training. If need be, they want to permit them to carry out arms.
But as these groups are about to step into the night, despite their lack of resources, they remain committed to protecting their communities in these difficult circumstances.
This Thursday marks the World Malaria Day. In a majority of sub-Saharan Africa, malaria is the leading cause of infant mortality. Ghana, Kenya and Malawi have been chosen to pilot the RTS malaria vaccine for 3 years. Since 2019, more than 2 million children have been vaccinated in those countries. Here's France 24's Ghana correspondent Justice Baidu and Theodore Abibu with more.
It's vaccination day at the St. Joseph Hospital. This health center is just on the outskirts of Accra. And for those gathered here, nearly everyone knows someone who has died from malaria in the past.
Malaria happens to be one of our top 10 priority cases as far as OPD is concerned. Before the introduction, the mothers show some hesitancy. But as time goes on, now everybody wants the child to take the vaccine.
Martha Obeng is one of the women who has brought her son to take the new anti-malaria vaccine. The Gumwa East municipality, where this hospital is located, is one of 93 in Ghana where this vaccine is administered.
My place is very bushy, and our problem is the mosquitoes. I have 3 children, and Danny is my last born. He has received 2 vaccines, malaria vaccine, and he is strong and very healthy. My first 2 children, they are dull, they are not strong like Danny.
The rollout faced an initial challenge of hesitation, especially among some religious groups, and anti-vaccine propaganda, largely on social media.
There has been a significant reduction in all-cause mortality and all-cause mortality and death among these children from all causes, of which obviously malaria will be inclusive because that is the #1 contributor in most of our countries of deaths in children under 5.
The country wants to extend the vaccine to cover all of its districts by 2025, but a lot of it depends on the availability of funds to buy them and the capacity of companies to produce the numbers needed.
Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Stay tuned for more news.
With news breaking at record speeds around the world.
Monitor right now 575 cameras. That number continues to grow.
Take time to go beyond the headlines.
Most of the foreign, they expect a lot of things in Korea. In reality, everything is changed.
France 24's senior reporters and correspondents take a deep dive into the stories that matter in Reporters and Reporters Plus.
Ukrainian forces are digging themselves in all over Bakhmut in case the Russians manage to make any significant progress.
Award-winning documentaries from across the globe on France 24 and France24.com. France 24, every art form.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.